I will follow up with an email in today's session with a lot of the links that I'm going to probably mention a bit as an off as we go through this, so that way you'll have some context what we try to show you. But my goal today is to show you really how to use the tool, but more importantly, how to use it, hopefully what you're trying to use PolicyMap for, and that's probably trying to get some data out of the platform into your own analysis, but hopefully I can also show you how to use the platform to do some pretty cool visualization of data itself. Cool. All right, so the mapping page is really the main tool of PolicyMap. You can kind of navigate and pan the map around. You can zoom in and out. It's all pretty basic stuff, really, when it comes to online maps, right? The search bar on the very top, there's two different types of searches. The one on the right is to zoom the maps to the place that you're working in. And so think of that as a Google search bar. That means you can type in an address if you wanted to, but you can also, more importantly, type in a city or so. And then from this, it will zoom to that place and kind of navigate down. So as you can see from the query, though, it is a geography search. So it'll be for counties, for congressional districts, school districts, all the different boundaries that you might be working in a given area. So the search allows you to navigate based on that. And again, you can type in an address if you wanted to as well. The other really unique function of the search is by default, you can search for basic, what we call common geographies, but you can also use the drop-down menu here to search for some more complex boundaries. Again, congressional districts, school districts, MSAs, metros, and such. And then probably one of the more useful functions of a mapping tool is that instead of having to type in one place at a time, maybe you want to be able to show congressional districts in the map or school districts in the map and such. And so that is the map boundaries on the top left here then. So this is all the different boundaries that we use in PolicyMap. So that way, again, you can show some pretty common geographies like block groups and tracts, zip codes and such as well, but then some really unique ones, again, like congressional districts, school districts and such. And so this allows you to overlay that boundary. And of course, you probably know your congressional district is just one big boundary for you. We do have legislative boundaries. So that way, if you want to see what localized boundaries are for the state, so this is your Senate, and then your House. And as you can see, you can start overlaying multiple boundaries at the same time within the tool. And that really comes into play when you want to see how maybe boundaries are contained within other geographies. So again, if you're trying to show something very simple like a zip code map in a given area, you have a little bit of customization. So things like removing the labels, but also changing the lines and the width and the colors. And that means that if you wanted to show a map of, let's say, zip codes in your area, and then maybe see how tracts are contained within that area, you have that unique ability to show containment of geographies. So you just got to change the line width for this one, and then from there you can see how the tracts sit within the ZICTAs on a very simple visual map. Another really neat function then, of course, about maps is that you can also make your own boundaries. So more than likely, you probably are working in an area that maybe has a radius from a certain address, or even a containment of a geography that you draw. So that is what we call a custom region. And so from this, you can see there's 3 unique ways to make a custom region. The draw feature is really just that. It's a simple way to click onto the map, and you're just dropping the vertices of points. So you can still zoom in. You can follow the lines, and then your goal is to, I always try to draw really complex boundaries, but click onto the first point or a point and it will close your drawn custom region. And so you can fix these at any time. So if this line wasn't there, you can move this boundary and fix boundaries at any time as well. And then when you're done, click save, and you have the ability to give it a name.
I have a quick question about the custom boundaries.
Sure, of course.
So you were just showing how you can you save it and then change it, tomorrow, like all of a sudden I'm like, oh wait.
Yes, of course, yes.
Move that boundary.
Yeah, so
I was having trouble with that. So for prime example, we are housing authority and city, so we have like CDBG, Section 8, etc. We operate Section 8 countywide. And last year we had 2 major wildfires, and so HUD, like first day is always calling us, okay, do you have any Section 8 claims impacted? Luckily, I kind of got tasked with it because I know PolicyMap a little bit, and I'm Napa native, so I know exactly where these like evacuation areas are that they're speaking of when they're using street names. So I luckily could go in,
Good.
and so I actually mapped custom areas, overlaid it with our custom upload, right, of our voucher clients. And but I kind of struggled. Of course, I was doing it for like 5 days in a row as the evacuation areas would change, but so I got a little bit more expeditious in doing it, but I didn't realize that you could kind of save it and come back and adjust it. So can you show us a little bit more of that
Yeah.
for the future?
So the cool thing is you probably use this in what we call the legacy version of PolicyMap, which is the old PolicyMap.
Oh,
So
maybe that was last year,
yeah,
so
yeah. So what you're going to see then is we have spent the last 2 years upgrading the underlying technology, and one of the biggest up changes was the ability to make edits to a custom region. So custom regions you created previously, you can access them anytime, and then you can you can edit those custom regions at any time. So if you drew a custom region, once you open the little new menu up here, you have the option to edit the boundary. This allows you to edit the shape. And from this, it releases all the points, so you can now redrag your points.
cool. Yeah, I don't recall that functionality, so
Oh
probably
yeah,
was
yeah.
the old.
You were definitely using the legacy. So yeah, so now you know that you can actually fix your old custom regions that you worked on. It just taking them to the new version of PolicyMap.
Cool. Okay.
Yeah. So that's a really good question, and that's another kind of neat function too. Is besides being able to edit, the other function is the assemble, which is probably a cool one as well. This is a much more probably informative way to make a custom region as well. This is just taking boundaries that are in PolicyMap, meaning you can take things like tracks, block groups, um, zip codes, even larger geographies and such, and then just assemble them together by clicking onto the map, and this will highlight those boundaries. And you can deselect the areas at any time, but when you're done, then you have the ability to also give it a name. And the same thing with the assemble custom region. At any time, you can go back in and select different geographies to assemble, to add and remove. And then the radius one is self-explanatory. The neat function of custom regions on the visual side is that it does give you the ability to show the areas that you're working in, and doing things, some simple things like customizing colors and such allows you to show multiple boundaries in the map, maybe see how they overlap and such. And so if you're working in different programs, different projects, you can see how those different projects might overlap. But probably one of the coolest feature though is the ability to take this custom region and put it into another user's account. So that way, if you're working on a program or a project, you can take this boundary and just share it with somebody else within the city, and they don't have to redraw anything. They don't have to figure out where you drew things and such. They can just open up their account, and then once you share it, it'll be available in the View My Regions. So this list here will be all the regions that you created, which you can access at any time, and this will zoom the maps to the place you created. But more importantly, if other users created boundaries, they can share it with your account, so you can access those boundaries. And the same thing, once they share it with you, you can edit those boundaries as well. So that way you can make your own edits to whatever they're working on in that project. So custom regions are really neat, and that's probably one of the nicer features, that is the ability for you to not only create maybe an area that you're trying to work in, but then also share that area with other users within the tool. Otherwise, it is called PolicyMap. So the goal of the tool is really to add data on top of the map, and all that data are in these categories above the map. And I know some of the KPIs that we're talking about is mainly business and employment related. So we do have some of those variables more indirectly, unfortunately, meaning that we probably don't have it exactly as what you're looking for, but there are some ways to get to close to what you're looking for. So if we were to go, business is a tough one because that is a data set that we are working on this year to buy. Business data in general is a pretty expensive data. It's probably one of the most expensive ones out. So we are definitely working on obtaining a larger types of business. So what we do have though are very basic information from federal agencies like BLS and QSU and such. So things like small business, a lot of this data, unfortunately, is very large geographies. So you're talking about business vacancies is at the state level because there isn't disseminated down to small geographies. But then we do have employment numbers that are small area estimates. So while you might not have business unemployment numbers like that, but you do have individual employment numbers. So from BLS, it comes annual and monthly numbers, but then the ACS aggregations of that as well. So the difference between these two is that BLS is updated monthly, but it's only, I believe, the smallest geography is the county and maybe the metro. Whereas the ACS, it is an estimated of the workforce, unfortunately. So it's not the actual count, but it does have smaller area geographies, meaning that you can see data down to the block groups and tracks and such. So some really unique characteristics of overall employment, if you're just looking to try to get a better understanding of types of workers in an area that you're looking for, are these two variables here, which is workforce characteristics. This is from the Longitudinal Employer Household Dynamics. It's a survey from QSU with the census, and what they do is they break out not only just total number of workers, but of course the individual jobs from the NAICS codes for the sectors. But also because it's coming from QSU through the census, it breaks out the demographics of the peoples. So things like income earners, educations for those workers, and then of course age, sex, age, and such. So really neat way to see workforce characteristics. And again, this is a neat way for you can see this at a very small geography. And of course, other variables related to business, the general data itself from the NAICS code. So this is BLS numbers as well as QSU numbers. If you do go to housing, this has a couple really neat indicators related to overall housing information. So we do have home sale data from Zillow, and this is going to be updated, and we're changing this over to a really neat data set from Moody's. So the Zillow data is going to be replaced by Moody's eventually. But with this is aggregated home sales. So you can see home sales down to the block group level, and you'll see that it's different types of actual home sales. So it's not just homes; it's single family, condominiums, multifamily, and such. But then from the same category, you're going to find information about renting information, home ownerships themselves, affordability calculations, and then we do subprime, or we do subsidized housing calculations with HUD and USDA. And then this is still within the housing part of it, maybe not as important, but there's a really pretty neat indicator within the lending tab. So the lending tab itself is mainly the HMDA data, which is that Home Mortgage Disclosure Act. So it's all loans reported back to Congress, and Congress publishes that data. So from this, you can start seeing where types of loans originated for neighborhoods. So these are individual loans. These are not business loans. But from this, you'll see the breakout of types of loans. So piggyback loans, subprime loans, HFA loans and such. But a neat indicator that came from that report is mortgage denials. So you can actually start seeing where the concentration of denials came from. And then because of that, it also breaks out really very, very unique racial characteristics of mortgage denials. There is, and I skipped a little bit about back in housing real quick, there is a little bit of vacancy data. As you can see, this is from Velasas Lists. And so this is a mail delivery vacancy. So that means that they have I believe it's a 120-day and a 90-day stat for that. But it does break out residential vacancy as well as business vacancy. So you can see where that concentration comes from. And that's kind of the basics of some of the KPIs of tourism dollars, dollars themselves, business dollars. We do not have that at this time. It's again, one of those really neat data sets that are locked away in a very expensive database that we are still working to buy in the future for the tool for users. Before I jump anywhere else, let me know if there are any other questions about data, or if you have any data that you're looking for in in particular, I'm happy to dig through it.
Hi, this is Neil. I was the one that shot you the email, the KPIs.
Yeah.
One, I knew that PolicyMap wasn't going to have all those KPIs. I just copied and paste. It's helpful to see this. I'm kind of playing around on the boundaries and kind of uh, what I would like to see. What I would like to get to, I guess, is to have a boundary around the city of Napa and then have, whatever the 3 to 5 KPIs that PolicyMap can pull for me, and in sort of like a dashboard thing. And it sounds like I'm completely new to PolicyMap. So it sounds like what you do is you create the boundary condition. So it could just be the metro area of the city of Napa, and then in that map, I can name it, economic development, city of Napa, for example, and then just have a bunch of metrics attached to that map, like my own personal map. Is that right? That's basically what you're showing me here, and how best to use the tool.
Yeah. So yeah, the maps page itself, the goal of maps is to visualize data, I will get to let me get to the data part so I can show you how it's visualized. But yes,
Oh, I
in a
see.
very
Okay.
basic what it does. I just wanted to give you
Okay.
some ideas of data so that way you can see some of the different data sets on here first. But yes, the goal of the tool is to give you the ability to visualize that data. So let's jump. We'll go into one of those variables. Let's do. I really do appreciate this QSU data. It's my favorite. So LAHD is just a really neat data set in itself, but this is basically what PolicyMap does. So the goal of the tool is to visualize data, and there's 2 types of really unique data sets within PolicyMap. The first, what we call a data layer, and that data, it means that the data is aggregated to a geography. And so you get these colorful maps here. And the legend is going to be your tool to explain everything that's kind of being shown. So the title of the data, which is saying this is the percentage of non-federal workers that live here that are under 30. So this is a really neat data set of millennial workers. If you pull up a data set that you're not familiar with, you can click onto the eye icon there, and this will give you a longer description. This is very helpful if you just want to get more details about the data. What we try to do within the description is a bit of methodology, just again, so that if you're trying to present the data, at least you have some context of what it means in that value. But the legend, the rest of it is really going to explain things like the geography. So everything that's being shaded in the map, which is mouse over, is what is a census tract. So the shade bias tracks, and then the color schemes of the values on the map. So anything in the dark purple, which we have none, is tracks that are over 27% of the workers here are under 30, whereas these ones fall within that 24 to 27% range of workers under 30, and then the lighter colors for that. So the legend is going to give you all the tools to read the map, but probably more important is that it's the tool that allows you to customize the data on the map. So maybe in this example, we don't want to see the percentage of workers under 30. Maybe we actually want to identify the number of workers. So the legend allows you to change things like the variable from, in this case, a percentage of workers to the number of workers, or even the percent change. You can actually start seeing where there's maybe a growth of under 30, so the millennial workers coming in and out of a given area. So changing the variable to number gives us a much different map. And now the dark purple, in this case, are still census tracts, but now it's places that have more than 538 persons that are under 30. So again, this unique variable of millennial workers on the map. So the legend is a little bit of customization, but also even further, you can also isolate ranges. So again, if you're presenting this map to maybe an audience, or you're using it in applications, you can isolate and say, these are the 2 tracks that we're working in that have a higher count of individuals that are under 30. Maybe we're looking to identify them for insurance purposes or trying to get them in certain programs. So the ability to isolate allows you to show one or a few ranges. And then probably just as important is the ability to make your own cut points then as well. So that way, if you wanted to show maybe not 5 colors, and you want to show just 3, and from the 3, we want to say no more than 150 persons, and then bring this up much higher to, let's say, 600. And so making your own cut points simplifies the map, and it also makes your ability to present the data much more clearer to the person or the application that you're trying to apply for. So the legend is very powerful, as you can tell, and the goal of it is to give you the ability to make some pretty unique edits. There are other types of data sets in here that are really unique. So it's not just income, it's not just jobs. You can use the data search on the left then as a keyword search then. So there's a lot of data. It's really tough to sometimes go through a lot of these categories. But in this case, if you're looking for something else, let's say, how about uninsured population in your city? So typing in something simple like insurance, this will show you that there's data from the ACS for persons without health insurance. And so now we have a map that shows by concentration, anything in the dark purple are still tracks that have 14% or 13.4% or more uninsured in that particular area. So this is what we call a data layer. So layer data is aggregate data. There's quite a bit of customization besides being able to change the variables, the years, the ranges, but also you can even change the geographies. So maybe you don't want to work at tracks. Maybe you want to work in a much more zoomed out area from Napa and look at this data at the maybe zip code level instead. This allows you to re-aggregate the data to the larger geographies. And again, it's just your preference of how you're presenting the data to the audience that you're working with. And then the other type of data that we have is what we call point data sets. So layer data is aggregate data, and then point data sets is what it sounds. So it's points on the map. And those are things like address data sets. So the thing about the menus themselves, the first submenu will always be what we call a point data set. So in this case, if we want to show where all your schools are in the given area, this particular point data set comes up. This legend has its own legend for points, and the legend's telling you that these little diamonds are your public schools. And then each public school, just like clicking onto the layer of the map, has a lot of data. You can click onto the point and has all the information that we pull from the source, which is NCES. So things like the school itself, what it covers, so K through 5th grade, 25:1 student-teacher ratio, number of students in class, demographics of the school, percentage of that as a population. So the point data set is really neat. It is just that, address data sets, but within these variables, we wanted to give users the ability to filter the points, because initially when you look at a point data set, you're seeing everything, and the filter allows you to basically whittle down those points to just maybe a handful of ones you're trying to identify. So there's a lot of filters for public schools, but it's simple things like, is it active? Does it cover what kind of groups of classes it covers, or the individual grades? Is it a magnet school? Is it a charter school? Demographics and such. So in this case, you can do something simple and say, we want to show middle schools in the map. And now only middle schools was shown in that query. But because it's a query function, you can actually combine filters, meaning you can say, I want to see middle schools and high schools. And it shows those whole range from 7th and to 12th grade of schools. But you can also filter against other categories. So you can say, of the schools that are middle school and high schools, we want to find ones that have maybe a really low student-teacher ratio, so 13, less than 13, or we can do a range of that, so we can do 14.9 and below. So now these are only schools that are middle school or high school that have 14.9% or lower of student-teacher ratio. So point data sets are probably a pretty easy one. And from this, say if we were to go back to insured population one more time, as you can see, you can combine layer data with point data sets, giving you a pretty neat map to be able to display those two things together. So this is basically the basics of PolicyMap, which is being able to add data to the tool, do some really neat customization of that data, some very powerful customization sometimes with the legends for both points and layers. And then from this, you can then export the map if you are adding this map to an application, to maybe additional work, or just trying to present information about the surrounding neighborhoods of the neighborhood itself. Because from this, you can then export the map using this very simple print icon on the right. And this allows you to save this map locally onto your computer. And then from that, of course, you can email it, again, put it into Word documents and PowerPoints. So that's kind of the basics of PolicyMap. There are some pretty cool features that you can do with it as well. And we'll keep going with that. But let me know if there's other questions so far about that. All right, cool. So one of the really neat things about the mapping tool is that initially, what we call a single layer map. The goal of this layer is to show you what we call data layer at a time, and give you quite a bit of customization of that data. But we definitely understand that there's probably sometimes a need to do some maybe even data analysis. So maybe we want to find out of these places that are a high concentration of uninsured population, where they are maybe in relationships to those under 30 workers, millennials, trying to get millennials insured in that process. And if you were to go and put that data set on the map, it'll flip to the other data. So you're not combining those two things together. And that's, of course, where the multi-map function comes in. So this toggle up here allows you then to overlay multiple layers of data, but there's some really cool functionality behind that. So initially what you'll see is one color, and this one color represents the exact range you want to display. So versus the single layer, which is trying to show you multiple colors, the multi-layer is one color, and you get to say, I want to show places that have at least 20% of the persons here are under 30 workers. So the map cleans out any other census tracts that are above or below 20%, and then only tracts in purple that are above 20%. And you can really adjust this as much as you want. So maybe it's 22%, maybe it's 25%, and so forth. From this, you can add another layer. Oh, go ahead, Neil.
No, I was sorry. I sort of missed how you got to this new feature with the percentage. Was that just you toggled on single layer, multi-layer?
Yep, that's it. Yeah, so the single layer initially is going to show you just one layer at a time with the multiple colors.
Oh.
But when you toggle over to multi-layers, then it allows you to control that one that value of one layer at a time.
Did I freeze or did?
Nope, this is me. So from here, this is where you can start overlaying multiple layers of data on the map. So if we were to take this example of 22% of the workers are under 30 here, we want to find out of these places where there are maybe a high concentration of people without health insurance. And so with this, we can go to the health data, find the uninsured population. And then the second layer that appears is also at 100%, but we're still within that first constraint of 22% of under 30 workers in these areas. And so from this, we can say, we'll bring this up a little higher, maybe 10% is going to wipe out my map. No, never mind. 10% is actually not bad. So only places in purple meet both criteria of at least 22% of the workers under 30 and at least 10% of the persons living here are without health insurance. And we can continue this and just bring this up a little higher. Maybe we want to look for more places that don't meet that criteria. So in this case, just that one track meets our criteria of both a higher concentration of under 30 and a real high concentration of persons without health insurance. Let me just bring this down a little bit. And then from this, maybe I'm trying to think of another good indicator for this. Let's say, quality of life. Maybe we're going to find out of these users, how many only use the internet, access the internet from the phone only. This is a really neat data set from the census. So from this, again, we're still constrained within the first two queries, but then the third query, same thing. It's it's at 100%. So we can cap this off. Maybe our goal is to bring this on the other side. So no more than 10% of the households access the internet using a smartphone. It's a very specific query we're doing here, but what we're getting then is a neat way to use data to identify places that you're trying to work in by continually adding data, but then also cutting the ranges up for each one of these data sets down until you're meeting these very specific criteria. And then from this, now you can identify these 3 tracks that meet 3 very specific criteria: under 30 workers, uninsured population, and only access the internet by a smartphone. So one of these neat things, if you're trying to do marketing or trying to get to these audience, then you have a very specific pieces of data to understand how to get to them in that process. So the multi-layers feature is on the legacy version of PolicyMap called the 3-layer maps. So the difference here is you can actually do up to 5 layers with this. And as you can see, the more layers you add, the less places you're going to get. So always be conscious of the criteria that you're applying data to. And then really the neat thing is you can play with the ranges until if you have fewer places that meet your criteria, maybe it's a chance to adjust some of these places to capture more together. But then, of course, the neat function of the query, though, is initially what this is an AND function, which is the intersection of these pieces of data. But sometimes you want to see how these data sets occur around these places that meet it. So we call that the OR function, and which is the overlap of the data. So what this does is it changes the map quite a bit. We get this very bright color map. So what we get is still places that meet all 3 criteria. Let me just adjust this. Let me see, 7%. There we go. This is a little better. So what we get is places that still meet all 3 criteria, but more importantly, what you start getting is to see the surrounding neighborhoods of places that meet just 1 criteria. So these are where under 30s are, but they don't meet the 2 criteria of uninsured and how they access the internet. And then this place meets only 2 criteria of under 30 and uninsured and such. So the OR feature is probably just as powerful because it gives you the ability to understand the surrounding neighborhood of the area that you're working in and not just the places that you meet the intersection. The intersection is neat because it allows you to focus your work maybe to just those places, but the OR function allows you to understand the neighborhood or the areas around it and what slightly different of those contrasts are. Yeah, and probably the last thing I can really talk about when it comes to using the multi-layer maps is it initially starts small. That's why I always usually tell users, start small with a few data sets that are maybe familiar with you for the given area. So that way when you're playing with it, you can understand how much to adjust, because that'll give you a feel of as you add more complex data sets, more data sets that are maybe not as common as something simple like access to the internet, where you're looking at NAICS code for jobs, or you're looking at vacancies for businesses. Those ranges might be much different than just individual ranges. So I always say start small with ranges that you're familiar with first: income, population, racial characteristics, and then from there, once you have a gist of how the ranges can adjust, you'll be able to flip to other more complex data sets easier. And then with this, you can export the map as well. So this gives you the same ability to print this map out. The neat function about the print, especially for OR and AND, is that it gives you the full legend. So that way, as you're presenting this, and understand this really neat modal, you can zoom in and out. So what you get from this window is exactly what you're going to export. So the legend, the text, the title, and such, you have quite a bit of control for this export. All right, so those are the 2 really pretty unique mapping interfaces. I'll just take a quick pause. Let me know if there are any other questions you might have. All right. It's a lot of things. It's a lot of data. If anything, I can reiterate again, single layer maps is you'll be able to pick it up fairly quickly. Just understand, use the legends. The legend has so much power in the customization of data that you'll really start being able to play around with it quite a bit to figure out what you want to display and such. And then the multi-maps, that's just a really cool way to transition from just looking at one layer at a time to do some really cool analysis as you get there. Okay, let me show you probably one last thing, and then we can go through some more complex stuff like downloading data if that's a bigger interest. But let me show you one last thing before we get to that part, and I'll show you some easy ones. And that's the reports page. The reports one is probably one of the easiest things you can do because reports are probably a very traditional way to look at data. The only thing about our reports is that they are pre-built. So you don't have the ability to customize the data within the reports themselves, but they are pretty unique reports. We group together similar data sets to build a report around. So a community profile report is like a demographic report, but it has a lot of really unique indicators related to the neighborhood as well. So housing stock, crime, and so forth. There's a fantastic house report that's at this time only available at the county and tract level. But if you want to get a very complex and very unique health report, this is one of our unique ones for the tool. But whatever report you choose, step 2 is to choose the area that you want to build the report for. So predefined works like that search bar, zip code, street address, and such. You can do a radius from an address. And then, of course, the custom regions that you created, you can get an aggregation of that custom region. So this is the one we drew. And with a drawn custom region, what our system does is use a very simple coverage rule, which is it aggregates at least 50% of the geography needs to sit within the custom region for the system for aggregation. So in this case, these are the tracts that were used in aggregation. So it looks like it's 12 from the 2000 census and 17 from the 2010 census boundaries. But then what you get is the population in this case in 2000, what it is in the most recent ACS, the percent change calculation of the aggregation of this unique boundary, and then some benchmark for the area that it sits in, which is the county and the state. As you get further, it's things like racial characteristics for the area, and again, it's an aggregation of your area, age groups, housing or income in ranges for the area. So it's a very diverse income. Family types, housing stock. So now we get to the community profile part of the report, where it talks about the area that people live in versus the top part of the report, which is the people that live there. So this is the housing stock, home ownerships, vacancy data, business and residential that's aggregated to the area. Employment information. This, because the data is not, this is coming from BLS, so it's going to use the larger geographies, which is the city and county, of course. If you wanted this as an aggregation of smaller geographies, there's a different way to get to it, but the report is going to show you BLS level numbers. Job types, and then crime data from the FBI crime report. So it's a really neat report. We sometimes call this report a snapshot of life in a given area. This basically is trying to give you the people and the places that people live in. So this allows you to basically download the report as a PDF that you can use in your research. And of course, other reports to choose from as well. Okay, so that's kind of the big stuff. Any other questions about what you've seen? All right, hopefully I'm not showing too much. Hopefully it does give you an idea of how to use the tool. There's a lot you can do in here. We try not to cover too much to overwhelm. Okay, let me show you one last thing, and then that way, if you have any other questions, you can always welcome to email me at any time. We can go through a much more specific way to use it for your use and such. The thing we won't cover today is the data loader, which is you do have the ability to upload your own address level data. So if you have survey data or if you have data for properties and such, we actually have a geocoder that will geocode the addresses and plot the points in the map. So we do have a data loader feature. I'll send you a link for that. So if you want to play around with it, it's pretty straightforward. What I really want to show you is the ability to download some of this data outside the tool, because I'm sure maybe you want to get some data for the county or even for the state, and you want to be able to pull that into whatever analysis you're doing. So there's a couple really easy ways to download the data. You can do it from the new version of PolicyMap. It's tied to two kind of important features. The first is, of course, it's tied to the data on the map. So we were to put a very simple data set like income. From here, you use the location bar to determine the area you want to download for, meaning that if you wanted to download for the county that the city's in or just the city itself, then you can search for it. What it'll do is it'll capture the whole area here, and then from this, you can see the data in what we call a table or a list feature. So the table feature is basically seeing the data in a tabular format. Kind of neat because the table actually syncs up with the map. So as you mouse over places, it'll mouse over as well. From this interface, you can choose maybe different geographies. So if you, instead of downloading for zip codes, you want to download for the tracks. This will also change the map as well. So now we're seeing data for the tracks. Whoops. But whatever you see from this list here, you have a very simple download icon, which will give you basically a CSV of all the tracks, or in this, all the tracks in this case that are contained within my county that I selected from the search bar on the very top. This is a very quick and easy way to get to data. It can get a little complex because you have quite a bit of navigation to get to data that you're looking for as well, meaning you have to change the geography in here sometimes, or you have to select the geography up here. So this is a quick way to get to data. It's probably an easier way to see how some of the data can be downloaded. There is a much more complex and probably much more robust way to download data, and that's using in the legacy feature. So something I probably won't cover today because it'll get a little complex in our session, but just want to show you there is an easy way to get the data, and it's simply just having the data on the map and using the search function. So once you see one of these icons here, you'll have the ability to clip that data directly from this menu.
And then what about taking a map with a certain data set and embedding it on a website or social media post and all that?
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's great. That's a great question. So the embed function, so there's a couple unique features to share a map besides just downloading it. In the new version of PolicyMap, the only share feature we have right now is the embed feature. We do have a link share, which is available in Legacy. We're finishing the share right now, unfortunately. So what we mean is that right now, if you wanted to take this map and you wanted to publish it onto a website, maybe you're writing a very comprehensive, maybe a blog or a report about something, you can actually embed these really neat maps onto that entry. And what these maps are interactive maps that will display the data that you see here. And I can show you a really neat example of this if you ever want to see it. They are on our blogs. And what you'll get to be able to see is these maps. We'll take a moment to load. So these are interactive maps from the tool. So these are the embedded maps, which the user can pan within the window. They can zoom in. Whoops. They can zoom in and out still, and of course select the data for this area. So the embed's neat because it allows you to put an interactive map on a web page that you're trying to present data for, and you can make an embedded map for about 95% of the data in PolicyMap, meaning any of our publicly available data sets, you can share embedded maps with, which is a very, very neat function. So it's not just income, it can be any of the other data sets. Yeah, the neat feature that Neil's talking about, which is, again, something we're finishing right now, is unfortunately still within our legacy version, and that is this ability to, whoops, using simple again. That is still the ability to, sorry, I have a session going on in the background that's doing this. So you still have the ability to embed the map, but currently the link and email function and social media he's talking about is available over here. So we're actually finishing it now. So this will be eventually on the new version of PolicyMap. What this allows you to do is take this link and share it with anyone, and then whoever clicks that link, will take them to exactly the map that you see here with the data you have on the map, with any customization that you did to the map. So it's a very neat and easy way to share an active link. So this is one of the neat things you can put into, again, an email, presentation, document. It gets them to an interactive map much faster than having to just maybe show a flat, non-dynamic map. Yeah, it's I think a lot of you are seeing some of the older version of PolicyMap stuff, which is great because I think you probably see some really neat things from there. But if you saw now, we've definitely have tried to move some of that really cool feature and functionality onto the new version of PolicyMap. All right. Any other questions I can answer? Okay. So again, I will follow up with the email that has a lot of links that we probably will help you go through some of these features on your own. If you want to learn some features, more importantly, all of my information will be there. So if you do have any just generic questions about data, about functionality, if you're trying to get to something that doesn't make sense, you're always welcome to email me. We're happy to answer those questions at any time.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone so much. Have a good day.
Yeah. Bye.